My granddaughter was 6 years old when she asked me why her new toy talked at night. I told her it was probably just a dream. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and went back downstairs. I sat in my recliner with the TV on mute, and a feeling that something was wrong sitting heavy in my chest. Not the kind of wrong you can name right away, the kind that lives behind your sternum and waits. 3 weeks later, I had a lawyer, a police report, and a recording that made a federal judge put her hand over her mouth. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it actually started. A Thursday afternoon in October, Emma running through the front door of my house in Nashville with her backpack swinging and her shoes untied, the way 6-year-olds run when they believe the world is entirely safe. I'd been her primary caretaker since she was 3. My son Thomas and his wife Lydia had gone through a bad stretch. Job loss, a move, what they called transitional instability, and what I called a year and a half of not knowing where Emma would sleep on any given night. The court had agreed with me. Temporary guardianship, which had quietly become permanent when nobody on their side challenged it. Emma lived with me in the house where I'd raised Thomas, where my wife Catherine had tended the garden out back before her heart gave out in 2019. Emma called me Pop. She knew the garden was Grandma Catherine's. She watered it herself on Sundays. Thomas had straightened out eventually. New job in logistics, stable apartment 40 minutes south in Hendersonville. He had Emma on alternating weekends. That part worked fine. It was Lydia I never trusted. Not from the beginning. And not because she was difficult to be around. She was actually charming in a specific way that people are charming when they've practiced it. But Catherine used to say, real warmth doesn't need maintenance. Lydia's warmth needed constant maintenance. That October, Lydia's mother and stepfather, I'll call them the Aldermans, drove up from Charlotte to visit. They were the kind of people who smiled with their whole face and meant nothing by it. Her stepfather Frank had made money in real estate during the 2000s and lost most of it quietly and spent the years since giving the impression he hadn't. Her mother Shirley collected grievances the way other women collect figurines. I'd sat across from them at 3 Thanksgivings and never once had a real conversation. They brought Emma a gift, a stuffed rabbit, the kind that's marketed as a learning companion. White, floppy-eared, with an embroidered carrot on its belly. Emma loved it immediately. She named it Biscuit. I thanked them. I made coffee. I made small talk about the mountains and the leaf season and whether the drive up from Charlotte had been bad. They left around 4. That night, Emma came to my room at 11:47. I know the time because I looked at my phone when she shook my arm. Pop, she whispered. Biscuit talks at night. I sat up. What do you mean, baby? I heard it. Like a crackle sound. And then like someone was there. I walked her back to her room. I picked up the rabbit. I turned it over. Nothing unusual. Nothing visible. The fur was thick and dense. I checked the tag. Just a brand name I didn't recognize. I told her it was probably the house settling, the old pipes doing their thing. I tucked her back in and left Biscuit on the dresser, not in the bed. In the morning, I almost convinced myself I'd been right. Almost. Here's the thing about being 67 and retired. I have time. I spent 34 years as an electrical engineer before I took early retirement to care for Catherine during her illness. I know what a circuit board looks like. I know what a transmission module sounds like if you know to listen for it. The next afternoon, while Emma was at school, I sat at my workbench in the garage with that rabbit and my multimeter and my reading glasses, and I took the bottom seam apart with a stitch ripper. It took me about 4 minutes to find it, tucked into the stuffing near the rabbit's spine, no bigger than a matchbook, a wireless audio transmitter. Active. Battery operated, with a small secondary component I had to look at twice before I recognized it, a low-grade audio receiver that could pick up voices in a standard-sized room. I didn't touch it further. I set the rabbit down carefully. I sat there for a long moment with my hands flat on the workbench. They were listening to my house. I didn't panic. I'm an engineer by training, and a grandfather by disposition, and both of those things require you to work the problem before you work the feeling. So I worked the problem. I took photographs, 12 of them, different angles, good light. I reassembled the seam loosely so nothing looked disturbed. I put the rabbit back on Emma's dresser. And then I sat in my kitchen with the cup of coffee going cold, and I started thinking through everything that had happened in the past 6 months with new eyes. The Aldermans had visited twice before, Each time, Shirley had made comments I'd filed away and half forgotten. "He's so capable for his age," said to Lydia like I wasn't in the room. "It must be a lot for him, keeping up with a little one." And then, 2 months ago, Thomas had mentioned casually that Lydia thought I should think about the future. He'd said it awkwardly, like he was delivering a message he hadn't agreed to carry. I'd changed the subject. Now I sat there and I thought, what future exactly were they thinking about? My house has been appraised at $310,000. Catherine and I bought it in 1991 for $87,000 and paid it off in 2009. I have retirement savings I won't share the full number of, but enough. I have a pension from 30 years with an engineering firm. On paper, I'm comfortable, more than comfortable. On paper, I'm worth something to the right people. I called my attorney the next morning, not a specialist, just Bill Harmon, who'd done my estate paperwork and has known me for 20 years. He listened to everything I said without interrupting, which is one of the reasons I've kept him. Then he said quietly, "James, I think you need someone who handles elder law specifically. I'm going to give you a name." The name was Carol Dewey. She had an office in downtown Asheville and a reputation in the county probate court that Bill described as not someone opposing counsel enjoys running into. I called her that afternoon. She agreed to meet the next day. I left the transmitter in the Rabbit. I needed them not to know I'd found it. Carol Dewey was 58 years old and had the efficient stillness of someone who'd stopped wasting motion a long time ago. She met me at 8 in the morning with a yellow legal pad and no small talk. I laid out everything, the transmitter, the aldermans, the comments, Thomas's message about the future. She wrote while I talked. When I finished, she set down her pen. "Has anyone mentioned guardianship to you directly?" "Not in those words." "Any conversations about your memory? Your capacity?" I thought about it. Lydia asked me twice this summer if I'd remembered to schedule Emma's dental appointment. The answer was yes, both times. She seemed surprised. Carol wrote something. "Do you have a primary care physician who knows you well?" 30 years. Dr. Mary, Okafor, over on Merrimon. "Good. I'm going to need a letter from him confirming your current cognitive and physical health. Standard procedure in these cases." She paused. "I'm also going to run a search on county filings. Give me 24 hours. She called me the following evening. Her voice was measured. "James, I need you to sit down." I was already sitting, but I didn't say so. A petition for modification of guardianship was filed 11 days ago in Buncombe County Probate Court. The petitioners are Lydia and Thomas Crawford. The filing argues that the current arrangement, you as primary guardian, is no longer in Emma's best interest due to, and I'm quoting directly, the primary guardian's age-related limitations, social isolation, and declining ability to provide appropriate developmental stimulation for a minor child. I sat with that for a moment. Thomas signed it. His name is on the petition. Whether he was fully aware of the language, I can't say. Who's their attorney? A pause. Gregory Holt. He practices out of Charlotte. I'm pulling his case history now, but I've heard the name before in a context I don't like. I found out later what that context was. Gregory Holt had filed 4 guardianship modification petitions in the past 2 years involving elderly individuals with assets. In 3 of those cases, the guardianship had transferred within 90 days. In 2 of those cases, the original guardian had been placed in assisted living within 6 months. Carol couldn't tell me what had happened to their assets after that, but she didn't have to. The transmitter in the Rabbit wasn't about concern for Emma. It was research. They were building a case, and they were using my home and my conversations and my granddaughter's bedroom to build it. I had 9 days before a preliminary hearing. 9 days. The escalation came faster than I expected. On day 3, Lydia called me. She was warm the way she always was, the warmth that required maintenance. She asked if Emma could come for a special girls' day with her and her mother that Saturday. Just the 3 of them. She gave me an address in Weaverville. A pottery studio, she said. Emma had mentioned wanting to try. Every instinct I had said no. But if I said no, I looked obstructive, overprotective. Exactly the kind of aging man who couldn't let the child have normal family relationships. So I said yes, and after I hung up, I called Carol. Go through with it, she said, but we're going to prepare. The day before Saturday, I took Emma to get a new jacket at the outdoor store on Tunnel Road. While we were there, I found what I was looking for, a child's GPS watch, pink with a rubber band, marketed for hiking families. It had a location tracker and an SOS button, and, tucked in the fine print of the app description, ambient audio capture that stored to the cloud. I told Emma it was a special pop present. I told her the red button was for if she ever felt scared or needed me and couldn't reach her phone. I told her to press it if anything felt wrong, and I would come. She looked at me with Catherine's eyes. You'll always come? Always. She pressed the button once, experimentally. My phone buzzed. I showed her. She smiled the way children smile when they've confirmed something they already believed. Saturday morning, Lydia picked Emma up at 9. Emma was wearing the watch. Lydia looked at it and called it darling. She had no idea. I spent the morning doing what I could not do while Emma was home. I went through 3 months of my own calendar notes, every interaction with Lydia and the aldermans I'd written down. I compiled the photographs of the transmitter. I wrote out a timeline, handwritten, 11 pages, the way I used to document project anomalies at the firm. At 12:43, my phone buzzed. Not the SOS. A location notification. Emma's watch showing she was no longer at any pottery studio. She was at a residential address in North Asheville. I looked it up. Frank and Shirley Alderman were renting a house there. 6 weeks ago, they'd moved from Charlotte. Nobody had told me. I called the pottery studio in Weaverville. A woman answered. I asked if they had a reservation for Lydia Crawford that morning. She checked. No reservation, no Crawford in their system. I tried Lydia's phone. Voicemail. Tried twice more. Voicemail. Then my phone buzzed again. SOS. Emma's location, Alderman House, North Asheville. I called 911 as I was walking to my car. My granddaughter activated an emergency alert. I was given a false location. She is at a residential address. I believe she may be in a situation she's frightened by. I gave them the address. The dispatcher asked if I was the legal guardian. Yes, primary guardian, and there is an active court petition. My attorney is Carol Dewey. Here is her number. The dispatcher's tone shifted in the way that meant they were taking it seriously. I drove. I want to tell you, I drove calmly, but I did not. I drove the way you drive when you are 67 years old, and you understand exactly what is at stake, and your hands know it before your brain does. A patrol car was already at the curb when I arrived. Officer, whose nameplate read Sutton, met me at the sidewalk. He was young and professional, and he had the steady manner of someone who dealt with family situations before. We went to the door together. Shirley opened it. She smiled. James, what a coincidence. Ma'am, Officer Sutton said, we received an emergency alert from a minor registered at this address. Oh, that was just a little accident. Emma was playing with the watch. And then Emma appeared behind her in the hallway and saw me, and her face did something I will not fully describe, because I don't have the right words for it, and I don't want to diminish it with the wrong ones. She ran. She hit me at full speed with her arms around my ribs, and I held her there with my hand on the back of her head, and I didn't say anything because there wasn't anything to say. Pop, she said into my shirt. They said you forgot to come. They kept saying you forgot. I did not forget, I said. I will never forget. Officer Sutton took statements. He spoke with Emma privately, away from the adults, the way they're trained to do. I watched Lydia standing near the fireplace with her arms crossed and her eyes moving to the front door and back. Shirley sat on the couch with an expression she was working hard to compose. Frank stood in the kitchen doorway, saying nothing at all. When Sutton came back, his expression was careful and controlled. The child reported that the adults asked her questions about you during the drive here, whether you forget her school schedule, whether you get confused about her medications, whether she ever has to remind you to make her meals. He paused. She says they told her the questions were practice for talking to a judge. Lydia started to say something. Sutton looked at her and she stopped. Mr. Crawford, he said to me, I'd like you to come to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement. I took Emma home. She fell asleep in the car with her head against the window, the way she does when she's spent everything she had. I carried her inside and put her to bed, and she didn't stir. In my study, I opened the GPS watch app on my computer. It had been logging audio. The cloud folder held 4 files. I put on headphones and pressed play on the one time-stamped 11:19 a.m., 20 minutes into the drive. Lydia's voice, clear through the car speakers. Okay, baby, let's go over it one more time. Emma, I don't want to. Shirley, Emma, sweetheart. You love your pop, right? Emma, yes. Shirley, then you want him to get help. Real help. Like a place where people can take care of him so he doesn't have to be tired all the time. Emma, Pop's not tired. Lydia, he seems tired to you because you're used to it. But the judge is going to ask you some questions, and we need to make sure you say the right things so they understand. Emma, what things? Lydia, say that sometimes Pop forgets your lunch. Say that he forgot your teacher's name once. Emma, he didn't forget. He just calls her your teacher because it's easier. A pause. Then Shirley, softer, with a different texture. Emma, if you don't help us, the judge might decide that nobody is watching out for Pop. And then something could happen to him. Something bad. You don't want that. Emma's voice small and starting to shake. No. Lydia, then say it. Repeat after me. My grandfather sometimes forgets important things. Emma, barely. My grandfather sometimes forgets important things. Lydia, good girl. I stopped the recording. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. I thought they would shake. Instead, I felt something very cold and very clear. The feeling I used to get in the final stages of a project, when every variable was accounted for, and the only thing left was execution. I had everything. Surveillance equipment placed in my home. A false location used to transport my granddaughter without my knowledge. Audio recording of adults coaching a 6-year-old to lie under oath. A guardianship petition filed by an attorney with a documented pattern of elder exploitation. And I had one more thing. I called Thomas. He answered on the second ring, which told me he'd been waiting for a call. His voice had the quality of a man who hadn't slept. Dad, I need you to come over, I said, tonight. He came. He sat across from me at the kitchen table where he'd done his homework as a boy, where Catherine had helped him with his college applications, where we'd eaten every Thanksgiving for 30 years. He looked like a man who had been carrying something for a very long time and was about to put it down. Tell me what you know, I said. He told me. He'd known about the petition for 3 weeks. Lydia had brought it to him as a done deal. Holt had already drafted it. Her parents had already agreed to provide statements. All Thomas had to do was sign. She'd told him it was about protecting Emma, making sure Emma had stability. She'd said I was getting older, and the responsibility was too much for me, and that this was the loving choice, the right choice, the thing a good son would want for his father. He'd asked once what would happen to me. She'd said, there are beautiful facilities. You'd visit all the time. He'd signed, but he'd also saved everything. He was an anxious man, Thomas, had been since childhood, the kind of person who keeps receipts for things he doesn't need receipts for. He had texts between Lydia and Holt going back 4 months. He had a text from Frank Alderman to Lydia that laid out a timeline for what happened after guardianship transferred. My house listed within 30 days, pension access via power of attorney within 60. He had a text from Lydia to her mother that said, once he's in a place, he won't be fighting anything. He won't even understand what happened. I didn't know about the rabbit, Thomas said. I didn't know about today. I didn't know about Emma. His voice broke on her name. I thought if I went along, she'd be protected. I thought if I kept quiet, at least I'd be there. I was wrong. He put a folder on the table between us. I want to testify, he said. I want to make it right. I looked at my son for a long moment. He looked back at me. You're going to have to explain to your daughter one day why you were quiet for as long as you were, I said. I know. Make sure the explanation is honest. Yes, sir. 7 days later, we walked into Buncombe County Courthouse. Carol and me and Thomas and Dr. Okafor, who had written a 2-page letter about my cognitive and physical health that used phrases like exceptional for any age, and I have found no evidence of decline in 3 decades of care. The hearing room was smaller than I expected. wood paneling, fluorescent lights. A judge named the Honorable Richard Tate, who had been on the probate bench for 22 years and had, according to Carol, seen most of what human beings are capable of, and was not easily impressed. Gregory Holt presented his case first. He was polished, well-dressed, had the easy confidence of a man accustomed to unopposed proceedings. Lydia testified. She was composed in tearful and careful turns. She said she worried about me. She said Emma had come home from weekends at my house with concerning things to report. She said she'd only ever acted out of love. Frank and Shirley Alderman provided supporting testimony. Shirley cried. It was a good performance. Then Carol stood up. She presented the photographs of the transmitter. She called the engineer she'd hired, who testified that the device was an active-grade audio transmitter, not a factory-installed component, not a commercial safety feature, placed deliberately inside the stuffed animal. She noted the purchase record Carol had subpoenaed, Frank Alderman's credit card, an electronic supply site, 6 weeks before the rabbit arrived at my house. The courtroom was quiet in a way that courtrooms aren't always quiet. She presented the GPS watch data. She presented the audio files in sequence. Emma's voice came out of the courtroom speakers, and I watched Judge Tate's face change in a way I will not try to overstate. It simply changed, in the way faces change when something that should not be true turns out to be true. She presented Thomas's folder, Holt's texts, the alderman's timeline. The phrase "he won't even understand what happened," read aloud in a formal proceeding where Lydia had, 10 minutes earlier, testified that she'd only ever acted out of love. Holt objected several times. Judge Tate overruled him each time with a brevity that conveyed exactly how little patience he had for the objections. Thomas took the stand. He was not polished. He stumbled on 2 answers and had to restart once, but he told the truth in the particular way that people tell the truth when they finally decided to stop not telling it. And there is a texture to that you cannot manufacture. When it was over, Judge Tate took a 15-minute recess. He came back and read his ruling standing up. Petition denied. Motion for emergency return of temporary guardianship to the original petitioners, also denied. Referral to the district attorney's office for investigation of elder abuse statutes, child exploitation statutes, and potential conspiracy charges. State bar referral for Gregory Holt. Restraining order. Lydia Crawford, Frank, and Shirley Alderman. No contact with Emma or with me for the duration of the criminal investigation. Emergency primary guardianship confirmed. James Crawford. Parental visitation for Thomas Crawford, supervised pending family court review, with the court's acknowledgement that his cooperation had been substantial and his testimony credible. Judge Tate looked up from his papers and over his glasses at the petitioner's table and said, without inflection, "This court takes a particularly dim view of using children as instruments in guardianship proceedings. Particularly dim." Lydia stared at the table. Outside the courthouse, Thomas stood next to me on the steps in the October cold, and neither of us said anything for a while. The mountains were doing what they do in fall. That specific blue-gray of the ridgeline when the leaves are mostly down and the sky is the color of water. "I have to call a divorce attorney," he said. "I know. I don't know how to explain this to Emma. You'll figure it out, honestly." He nodded. He looked like a man who had a lot of work ahead of him and knew it and had decided to do it anyway. That was something. 3 months later, Gregory Holt surrendered his law license pending criminal proceedings. The DA's office filed charges that included conspiracy to commit elder fraud and 1 count related to the surveillance device. Frank Alderman was charged separately. Lydia's criminal case was still pending, though her attorney, a new one, had reportedly approached the DA about a cooperation agreement. Thomas has Emma every other weekend. She calls him Dad now, which she hadn't been doing consistently before. They're figuring it out. Emma's rabbit sits in a box in my garage. I've thought about throwing it away and decided not to yet. Carol says it's still evidence. I think maybe I keep it because I want Emma to be able to ask me about it someday when she's old enough. And I want to be able to show her what the truth looks like when you find it. She asked me last Sunday, while we were watering Catherine's garden, whether I had been scared. I thought about that honestly. "Yes," I told her, "for about 10 minutes. What happened after 10 minutes? I started taking pictures." She thought about that with the specific seriousness that 6-year-olds bring to things that matter to them. Then she turned the hose back on, and went back to the roses. I watched her and thought about what it cost to not act, what I would have lost. Not the house, not the pension, though those things are not nothing, but this Sunday, this garden, this child who waters the roses her grandmother planted and trusts that I'll always come when she presses the button. I'll tell you what I tell everyone who hears this story and asks if I went too far. There's no such thing as too far when someone is using a child to bury you. What there is exactly far enough. You document. You call someone who knows the law. You do not wait until you understand everything before you act on the part you understand. And you do not, under any circumstances, let the people who are counting on your silence mistake that silence for agreement. They counted on me being old. They counted on me being tired. They counted on me not knowing that a stuffed rabbit could carry a transmitter, or that a child's GPS watch could record a car ride. I'm 67, and I was an electrical engineer for 34 years. I know exactly what a transmission module sounds like. People ask me if I'm angry. I think about that honestly every time someone asks, because I want to give an accurate answer and not just a satisfying one. The truth is, I moved through anger so fast, I barely registered it. What I remember feeling, sitting in my study with those headphones on, and Emma's small voice coming through them, was something closer to clarity. The kind that arrives when you finally understand the full shape of a thing you'd only been seeing pieces of. What Lydia and her parents built. The petition, the transmitter, the coached questions, the false address. They built it on an assumption. The assumption was that I was already what they were trying to make me look like. Confused. Slow. Too tired to fight. They chose me because they believe the story about aging that gets told so often people stop questioning it. That past a certain point, a man is already mostly gone, and whatever remains can be managed. That assumption was the first cause. Everything that came after was its consequence. I think about Thomas in that kitchen, signing his name to a document he didn't fully read, telling himself that staying quiet was a form of protection. I understand the fear that produces that choice. I don't excuse it, but I understand it. What I've come to believe is that silence in the face of something wrong is never neutral. It always tips the scale in one direction. Thomas learned that. He's learning it still. Every weekend he picks up Emma and has to be the father he wasn't in. Those months he looked away. What I want anyone who hears this story to take away isn't the part about the rabbit or the courtroom or the recordings, though those things matter as evidence. What I want them to take is simpler than that. The people who came after what was mine were not unusually clever or uniquely evil. They were ordinary people who had identified a target they believed would not resist, and they were wrong about that. And that wrongness unraveled everything they'd built. Resistance requires paying attention. It requires not explaining away the thing that feels wrong, because explaining it away is more comfortable. Emma heard something strange in that rabbit and told me about it. She was 6. She didn't know what a transmitter was. She just knew something wasn't right and said so. I almost talked myself out of believing her. I'm glad I didn't. The intelligence required to survive something like this isn't exceptional. It's the ordinary intelligence of a person who trusts their own perception and acts on it before the window closes. I took photographs. I called a lawyer before I confronted anyone. I documented what I had before I revealed what I knew. None of that required genius. It required the discipline not to react before I was ready. And Emma is fine. She waters the garden on Sundays. She's in first grade, and she has strong opinions about which books are worth rereading and which ones aren't. She knows that when she presses that button, I come. That's the only part that was ever really at stake. Everything else, the house, the pension, the savings, that's paper. Emma is not paper. They counted on me being old. I am old. I'm 67, and I creak when I get up in the morning. And I can't read without glasses, and I think about Catherine every single day. None of that made me easier to defeat. If anything, it made me harder. When you've already lost the person who mattered most, you understand with a precision that younger people don't yet have exactly what is worth fighting for. I fought for what was worth fighting for. That's all any of us can do.